Okay.
So I am going to call to order the Finance and Administration Committee of the Board of Directors of Marin Municipal for today, March 24th, 2022. But we're going to take a few minutes because we are in this new hybrid world, and I'm informed by the board secretary that we just need to all hold tight for a minute while we let people in the both the board meeting in person as well as the folks participating by Zoom. And I believe the general manager, you said, because I can't see, I can only see you, Terry, has stepped away. So we're just going to hang out here, and you're on mute, Terry. Are you? Because I couldn't hear you.
Yes, I was on mute.
Okay, so we're just going to hang out here just so that people aren't wondering why we're not talking for a minute until the board secretary tells us it's time to go in this brave new hybrid world.
We are ready to go now.
Okay, good. Then at that point, I'm looking for a roll call that we're all, that we're all here.
You're muted now, Terry.
Yeah. Okay, so Director Bragman.
Here.
Director Gibson.
Here.
Director, I'm sorry, Director Kohler.
I'm here.
Director Schmidt
Here.
and Director Russell.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm looking for a motion to adopt the agenda.
Move approval of the agenda.
Second.
Do we have any public comment on approval of the agenda?
Yes, I do believe there is one person, Mr. Roger Roberts. So hold on, Mr. Roberts. So we're going to do our timer here. First time.
Ah,
Okay.
interesting.
I like it.
Hold on.
Yeah.
And Mr. Roberts, I'm going to unmute you, or able to have you speak. And then once I can hear you, I'm going to start the timer. Go ahead, sir.
Can you hear me?
We do, Roger.
It won't surprise you for me to say that I have always been concerned about the financial well-being of the Marin Municipal Water District. But that isn't the specific topic that I want to raise this morning.
Oh, Roger, let me just stop you there. This is not the moment for public comment. We're just looking for comment on adoption of the agenda.
Ah, okay. Well,
Do you have a comment on the agenda? Do you mind? I just want to be sure we get through through this orderly. Right
Okay.
now, what's on the table is a motion to adopt the agenda.
Okay, fine.
Okay. Do we have any other comments on the motion to adopt the agenda?
There are no further comments.
Okay, then we need a roll call vote.
Okay. Director Bragman. Director Gibson.
Aye.
Director Kohler.
Aye.
Director Schmidt.
Aye.
Director Russell.
Aye.
Okay, Roger, you're up.
Okay, I'll continue. I guess you can hear me.
We can.
Loud and clear.
Okay. It stands to reason that the water district should be able to.
Sorry about that. Hold on, Mr. Roger Roberts.
Thanks for your patience, Roger. We're just dealing in this new technological
Yeah.
age. You will definitely have all of your time.
Wrong
Okay.
screen. Oh my goodness, Mr. Roberts. Hold on, sir.
The old analog approach might be best.
Yeah.
Isn't technology
Yeah.
great?
We're trying. Hold on.
Well, it's all good. It's all good.
Okay. All right, here
I'm
we
not-
go. Go ahead, sir. Ready to go.
Okay.
There you
It stands to reason that the water district should be able to replenish reserve accounts that have been spent down in order to meet the needs of the organization. And that's been the case during our drought period when you spent down the rate stabilization fund to meet the needs of the organization. Now, I have had a look at the financial management for water utilities referenced by the American Water Works Association, and unfortunately, they do not speak to this particular issue, and they refer me to cost of service and rate design manual AWWA manual M1. And I would hope that manual would say that you in fact can do this. You can replenish your reserves in the event that they have been drawn down without going through a cost of service analysis. Now, it would seem to me to be prudent for you to do that now in a rising interest rate environment, assuming that that's something you can proceed with. And I would suggest that you should follow up on this and take action sooner rather than later. And ultimately, I would hope that the district would ultimately establish a depreciation reserve, which would give you some cushioning for future financial crises. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. Those are great ideas. I just want to note and maybe get your thinking about this, that the rate stabilization reserve worked exactly as we planned for it to, right? I mean, this was really an example of the board and the staff doing that advanced planning that we've discussed with you over the years, making sure that we had those funds well established, and they really worked as really perfectly, exactly as planned. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay.
And all the more reason why you should replenish them now,
Yeah.
when you can do it at lower financial costs in a rising interest rate environment.
Yeah.
Because if you wait until later in the year, it's going to cost you more. And I don't think you should wait until you're ready to do a COSA analysis for capital financial replacement needs.
I appreciate that. I think it's a good thought, and we may want to just get with you offline to talk about that further.
That's all. Thank you.
Are there any other comments on items not on the agenda, Terry? You're muted. I can't hear you at all. Can anybody else?
Can you hear
Oh,
me
there you
now?
are. There we are. Now we can hear you.
There we go. Okay, I apologize about that. Okay.
So there were no other comments on
There
the
are no
agenda?
other comments.
Okay, I think that brings us to our next item, which is I'm looking for a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting, which was in February.
Move approval.
Do
Okay,
we have any comments on this item, Terry?
there are none.
Okay, then we're looking for a roll call.
Director Bragman. Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Russell,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gibson,
Aye.
and Chair Kohler.
Aye. Okay, that brings us to the monthly financial update. Our first one without Chuck. Who's doing this?
It's Mick Young.
Oh, okay. I can't see her. I can only see Terry. If she's speaking, I can't hear.
I don't see her either.
Terry, we can't see or hear McYoung.
Correct.
She said her mic is on. Hold on, hold on for 1 minute.
Okay.
This is the hybrid problem.
No,
Nah,
we're
it's okay. It's fine.
we're just
working it out.
guys. That's what we're doing. This is the first time. It's not a problem.
It's a light agenda.
You know, while we're waiting, it occurs to me what we may want to do in this hybrid world is have whoever is speaking move into Terry's seat. It may be a little bit awkward for folks there, but I think for the Zoom folks, it's important to see the person who's speaking.
It would also be possible to, I mean, we're going to figure this out over time, but, cameras are not that expensive. It wouldn't be that hard to frankly mount a camera in front of all the board chairs and just cycle through them.
That's an idea. Terry, we can't hear you.
You're doing great, Terry.
We can't hear. It looks like you're talking, but we cannot hear you. We still cannot hear you, Terry.
Hold on, I need a few minutes. I'm having.
No problem, no
trying to
problem.
communicate to 20 people here. Hold on.
Sure, sure. Oh, now
got it.
room. Seeing the room is helpful. That's good.
Right.
Huh?
You're right.
We did a couple dry rounds.
It's interesting. Yeah, well, Zoom changed everything, really. Yeah, I think so too.
That's great.
Okay, we got it now. We're good. So let me go to the actual screen again. Can
Okay.
you see McYoung?
We see the board room. We
All right, there you
don't in
go.
particular.
Yeah, I just raised my hand. So, okay, I'll start all over. Good morning, Finance and Administration Committee Board. My name is McYoung Pustelnik, even though you cannot see me yet. Finance Manager filling in for the Finance Director's position until it's recruited. So this is a financial update as of February 2022. Okay, so looking at the revenue slide, this is all revenue, operating and capital revenue. So we're at overall revenue 60%. However, looking at the water revenue, we are at 57%, 49 million. By this time of the fiscal year, in normal years, we should be at 72%. So I just want to note on that. That is due to the conservation. So another unusual item is other revenue. We are at 140% of budgeted revenue, which is due to the COVID relief fund we received in December. We received 2 million, which was not budgeted item.
A happy instance.
Yes,
McYoung, where is that indicated?
other revenue, other operating revenue, second line.
Oh, I see. Yep. Okay, sorry.
So 2.1 is included in 3.9 million in there.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, next slide. So this is a detail of the revenue, just focus on the water revenue. So first two columns are budget and actual. So look at the water revenue, we are at 53%, 30.4 million. So normal years, we should be at around 72%. And service charge and watershed management fees are fixed fees, and they are in line with the budgeted revenue. Okay, so next slide. So this graph, no, backward, back. Okay, so this graph shows the water sales compared to prior year, month to month. So you can see the blue line is the 22 revenue and the red line is, oh shoot. Yeah, that's the one. Red line is the fiscal year 21. So you can see that water revenue compared to prior years, month to month, we are significantly lower. Can you hear me? Lower than previous year, except for the month of February. So business is opening up, as well as we had a almost zero rainfall during the month of December and January, compared to 21 and 20, which when we received 6 inches of rain in January and 4 inches of rain in December 20. So that's another factor that we see slight increase in water revenue. So this is a detail by customer class, and looking at the each customer class's water consumption. This is not a revenue. This is in acre feet of water consumption. So almost across all of our customer classes, you can see significant decreases in the water consumption. So it's about 26% water consumption decline compared to prior year.
McYoung, do you know when the consumption figures, how far they go up to, as far as what period of time they reflect?
In this fiscal year, it's a
Oh.
year to date.
To date?
Yeah, as of February. So July through February. Yes.
Okay,
July to end of February is a year eight.
yeah, okay. But we have the data up to the end of February?
Yes.
In terms of actual sales.
Yes.
Okay,
Just a reminder to
okay.
everyone here.
Right.
Yeah, it's super hard. I hear Larry Bragman really well. I don't hear Ben very well.
My mistake.
So just to follow up on that, so are the end of February figures, do they reflect actual use to the end of February, or do they reflect
So
data collected as of a month before or whatever? Is there a lag?
yeah, there is a lag. So this is a billed water consumption. So there's a 2-month lag.
There's still, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So to be clear, that's really helpful, McYoung. So what we're looking at here in terms of the increase, decrease, that's actually not as of February, that's as of December because of the lag?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Got it.
And is there, in this more of an operational thing, can we get the data more quickly from our meter readers?
Yeah, so, well, on the water supply reports, that's real time, but that's gross district-wide production, but
Right.
it does help certainly with the trends. The water sales is really based on build. And, you know, we read meters every other month, so we're kind of stuck for now in actual hard water sales in terms of billing being behind.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I would think there would be a way where the readers could just enter data, digitally, where we could get a quicker read as far as.
Right. So if someone reads a meter today, we only do bi-monthly reads. So that's really looking for the past
Yeah.
2 months.
Okay.
Now, AMI, of course, as we'll be talking about going forward, will change
It's
that
real time.
immediately.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Okay, thanks a lot. Sorry.
We have a
about that.
couple of slides showing the AMI data and the sample.
Yeah.
Can I ask McYoung, before you leave that other slide, could you just go back? I think it would be helpful for the board and the public, because I think that's a really important point. I looked at these numbers and I thought they were as of February, but to the extent that they are, there's a 2-month lag. I think if you could put that in the title somewhere, or just I think that would be helpful to know that something so that people looking at this understand that there's a 2-month lag here, just for future documentation.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks.
We'll change the title starting next month.
Thanks.
So next slide. So this is again tier consumption, showing the first tier and then the other tier. So you can see the significant increase in the tier 1 due to the water conservation. And over the last several years, this is the lowest if you compare to the last 7 years. So this is a graph, actually real data as of February. So you can look at the small sample of residential customers of water usage in Belvedere and Tiburon. So the orange line represent the 22 fiscal year 22 consumption, and then the gray line is the 21. Oh, shoot. So excuse me, let me correct. The yellow line is the 22, orange line is 20, and the gray bar is the 21, and the blue line is 21. So looking at the water consumptions, again, February is slight increase due to the dry weather in December and January, as well as February. So again, this is the real data as of February. Again, yellow bar is the 22 and gray is the 20. So you can see again, slight increase in January and February compared to other months in calendar year 20 due to the dry weather in January and February. We did not have any rainfall compared to prior calendar years. So looking at our expenditures, we are at overall 62.9% on the operating expenditures, and we are at 54.4% in the capital expenditures. However, if in the next slide, I will show you the detail. We have a commitment that we will have to pay out. So next slide. So looking at the 11.2 million commitment item in the capital encumbrances, so we are overall at 62.6%, 85 million. So which is about along the line of the budget this time of the year. So our fund balance as of February, our unrestricted operating reserve is at 25 million, which is a significant decrease compared to June, as of June 21, about 7.6 million decrease. And due to the decrease in the significant revenue decrease. And our capital fund is at 25 million. It's going to decrease as we pay over the commitment in the contract, and our all other designated and restricted fund balances is about the same. And our debt service is still the 146 million, as we usually pay our debt service twice a year in December and in June. That's when we will see a decrease in our debt service, that fund balance. Next slide. So this is our reserve, especially focusing the rate stabilization fund, which is the same as in January. We have spent down about 7 million. Bulk of it is to fund the emergency capital projects, and the 1.5 million in the operating due to the revenue shortfall. Next slide is the water accounts receivable aging. This was requested by Director Bregman last meeting. You wanted to see the impact on the COVID relief fund. So you can see about a million decrease in our outstanding balance. So even though we received about 2 million in the COVID relief fund, we are showing only 1 million decrease, which is because we collected some of the account receivables in the fund balance. So the rest of the 2 million will be refunded to the customers, and then which will not impact our actually revenue.
Okay. So it does impact your
About a million.
the calculation of our past due accounts.
Yes,
right?
it does.
Okay.
And next
Can
slide.
I'm sorry, can you go back to that for just 1 second? So just to be clear, the 2 million isn't exclusively for those purposes, right? That can be, or can you just clarify what limitations there are on those ARPA funds? Because, obviously we all feel that they should be applied to this kind of customer support. But if we don't use the full 2 million, I just want to make sure I understand if there's any encumbrances on those funds.
So there's a restriction on application of the COVID relief fund. It has to be applied to specific outstanding invoices.
Okay, it
And,
does.
from April 20 to June 21, we cannot really apply to any outstanding invoices. So there's a restriction, and whatever is not applied to past due invoices, we will have to actually refund to the customers,
To the
Okay,
customer or to the funder?
to water customers.
Okay, so were the outstanding delinquent balances less than the money we got, or?
it looks like it.
So
Do you know
when
yet?
we look at the past due invoices for the specific duration of April 20 to June 21, so we have outstanding balances. However, since then we collected from those past due invoices. So that's why it was reduced since then.
Mhm.
Do we know the amount that will be credited to the customers out of that grant?
Which is about $1 million. Out of
Oh.
2 million, we only applied 1 million. So we have to actually credit to the customers about $1 million, and that's going to be refunded to customers.
Oh, all right.
Yes.
That's
Just,
interesting. I mean, is there any way for that to move into a reserve, since the reserves are essentially a way of providing, relief to customers? Or does it all have to be specifically related to this period of time?
Yes, there's a restriction on application of this
Okay.
grant fund coming from FEMA. There's
Okay,
a specific restrictions that we cannot freely move to other reserve.
right. So
it.
as far as the money in excess of the million that was accrued from during the time period,
Mhm.
how is that allocated to the customers?
So when we see there's a still outstanding invoices for during the duration, we apply to those outstanding invoices so that they're no longer outstanding invoices. That's why you can see decrease in the past due invoices significantly in the 90 days and over, and then as well as 365 days and over.
So you'll look back?
Yes, we have to look back at that time. of
Okay,
the invoice.
all right. Well, at least they get credit for it.
So is there any other questions? If none, I'd like to introduce our financial management analyst, Shelley Riley, who will be going over the drought impacts and projections for the current year and next fiscal year.
Hello, board. This is Shelley Riley. Going into the financial challenges. As you all know, since the beginning of this fiscal year, we've been under drought conditions. The district targeted a 40% conservation rate. From strictly financial standpoint, less water consumption means less revenue from the district. Also, the district has experienced expenditures higher than the original adopted budget. Our water conservation customer rebate program costs are about $1.5 million higher than the adopted budget, which was $591,000. Projected to end of the year around about $2 million. We also anticipate an increase of the amount of water purchased from the Sonoma County Water Agency for an additional 3,000 acre square feet or acre foot of water for about $4 million more than the budget. As like the rest of the world is experiencing higher than normal inflation, which will increase the cost of consumables. Primarily for the district, this is increased costs in chemicals, energy, and paving materials. Next slide. So this slide is very similar to what McYoung showed earlier. It's also an attachment with the staff report. It's primarily focused on just water sales affecting the operations. The left-hand side, again, is the budget under normal years, and the right-hand side is what we've received year to date. As you could see in February on the blue shaded line, we would expect to be about $43.4 million. Again, about 74% of the budget. We're currently, so far, I've only received 31.4 million, 53% of the projected budget for revenue. So this accounts for about a $12 million revenue loss on the year so far. Next. So again, this is just the same information graphed. The blue line, again, is the budget with the projected year-end revenue being about $58.5 million. The lighter green line from July to February is actual revenue received. And then you'll see after that, the line splits into two. The darker green line assumes normal consumption of water over the next 4-month period, March to June, meaning zero reduction in water use. At that reduction level or zero reduction level, we'd end the year at $46.5 million of water sales revenue. The lighter green line from March to June is if consumers reduce water use by 20% over the next 4 months. At that point, we would project the year-end revenue to be $43.5 million. So that would add another $3 million of lost revenue between now and the year end, ending the year with a $15 million less revenue than anticipated in the original budget. Next. So this slide is all of the operating revenue, very similar, like I said, to what McYoung showed, starting with the adopted budget. We also included the other operating revenue of service charges, watershed management fees, and other revenue. Primarily, we're looking at different scenarios for water sales. The 0% reduction and 20% reduction was what was shown on the two green lines in the prior slide. We also want to show a 5% reduction rate. The service charges and watershed management fees are tracking very close to the budget. We forecast the service charges to come in at 22 million, about $500,000 short of what we originally projected. Watershed maintenance fees coming in at about 4.9 million by year end, so just slightly less than the $5 million budget mark. Other revenue, as McYoung mentioned, is primarily higher at 4.8 million compared to 2.7 budget due to the COVID relief funds. And there may be some adjustments there depending on how much we have to return. So what we're looking at is total operating budget under the various scenarios, adjusting from 10.5 million down to 13.5, depending on what happens over the next 4 months compared to what we originally budgeted. Moving on to forecasting the expenditure side. Again, we expect to spend a little more money in water purchases over the next 4 months to a forecasted total of 12.1 million over the original 8.1 million initially budgeted. And water conservation rebate program, again, is running a little bit higher, 1.5 million higher than what was originally budgeted. Currently, right now, we're at 1.4 million, so we expect to spend about $500,000 more over the next 4 months or so. Luckily, on the expenditure side, we do see some vacancy savings in personnel services. We forecast the year end to come in about $48 million, which would be a $5.8 million savings. So total forecasted operating expenditures at year end would be $88.4 million, with a small savings of about 300,000 by year end.
Can I just stop you there for a second?
Sure.
So I just want to sort of point out to the board the water rebate program, which I think, you know, the whole board has strongly supported this whole time. There's interest in exploring doing more of that as we move, you know, try to move to a more climate resilient and sustainable approach to our water supply, which I know is part of the water assessment coming up. But this is, I just want to point out, and maybe have some board conversation about this. This is all under operating expenses, which are supposed to be annual expenses, right? Which the conservation rebates are not. We're spending that money. Nobody's replacing their toilet every year. Nobody's changing their lawns out every year. These are actually longer term investments in the community and in supply. So this really is a kind of a very concrete way of showing a bit of the conversations we've been having over the last couple of years about moving some of this into capital so that those costs are spread, are amortized over time, which will, take some pressure off of the operating budget. And also, it's just better accounting, because these are not annual expenses, and we'd be spreading those costs sort of over the life of the things being purchased, which is, and also over the ratepayers who are benefiting from them. So I just want to, because that's, to me, 2.1 million is, fairly, I mean, it's less than we budgeted. You're absolutely right, but it's probably where we need to be, if not higher, if we're going to reach the sustainability and the climate resilience goals we've set for ourselves. So I just want to pause there and see if anybody's got thoughts about that one way or another. And if not, we should just move on.
I don't have thoughts about that, but I have thoughts about something else.
Yeah,
Well,
I do too.
Okay, fine.
I'll tell you, Ben, I am blown away by this analysis. I mean, why haven't we seen this before? Or have I been asleep at the switch? Because I haven't been sensing this kind of magnitude of dollars, but maybe I just missed it. I'm not sure.
No,
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, Ben.
I'm not sure which, if you're talking about collectively or the individual line item.
I'm looking at the slide titled FY22 operating revenue scenarios.
Yes. Yes, I think that was the intent today, to bring this. It's a fair point that staff has been looking at this and talking about it. And we, I'm glad we're doing it now, but earlier probably would have been better. In the middle of the drought emergency is really kind of how we were thinking. We're in a crisis, we're using reserves. That's what they were there for. And we had to get out of that crisis. Now that we're kind of out of the water shortage emergency, we have an opportunity to look at what we spent, look at the drop in revenues, and strategize where we go for the remainder of this fiscal year and into next fiscal year.
Well, that's a part of it, Ben. But more importantly, I think, is that the problem here is that we weren't able to follow, but we didn't follow the prescripted plan, which was when you institute these requests for reduction in water consumption, you increase the rates. That didn't happen because of the 218 issues, as I recall. So we kind of, got ourselves shot in the foot here, it appears to me, because we didn't do what everybody has always done historically. And if you saw today's Chronicle, the front page above the fold, that the water department in San Francisco, that's a PUD, is raising rates 5% on both water and wastewater to accommodate for impact of the drought.
But Larry, to be fair, though, the other reason that we didn't, and I agree that is the standard industry practice during drought, but there were two reasons we didn't. First, we had very well-funded reserves, which were here for that purpose. And the second, I think more important, is that it was coinciding with the pandemic. And we had a number of conversations, just to refresh your memory a little bit, that would not be, that in light of the twofer here, the drought combined with the pandemic, that this was not the right time to be imposing a rate increase on a community that was already suffering financially and otherwise as a result of the pandemic. I mean, that's really
true.
It's a very unusual confluence, and I feel that we were, very intentional in that decision.
That's all fine, but like I say, I don't understand why we haven't cleared up the 218 issue.
Well, that's a different issue, right?
But that was what I understood actually stopped us from even considering a rate increase.
So Director Russell, our plan on the 218, and we are kind of now starting to plan for the next rate and 218 process is we will have in our 218 process going forward, we'll incorporate our drought rates into that. So they'll be fully covered under 218.
So
And
just
I
can I just
Go ahead,
ask
go
a
ahead.
clarifying question, which is, so our current sense is that there are, that because of 218 restrictions, we cannot make a rate adjustment right now in order to address the drought impacts on our revenue. Is that what I'm understanding?
Well,
Or is it
benefiting
a point
from,
of debate?
Director Schmidt, benefiting from sitting next to council, we would need to go through, and we did lightly touch on this, a targeted 218 process prior to moving forward with drought rates, if that's the direction we wanted to do.
We also did pass emergency drought rates, which we rescinded, I think, in January after we got the atmospheric river, because we were sort of caught in the paradox of having good supply in the midst of drought. So we dropped we do have authority to increase rates during drought as an emergency.
As long as they're consistent with 218, and because of where we found ourselves with some legacy issues that we need to address, what we did is we developed allocations with penalties. So it wasn't a drought rate, and the penalties couldn't align with, they couldn't be driven by the revenue deficit, but
Yeah,
they
yeah,
were
okay.
rather significant and would have increased the revenue. So I think generally you're right, that we do have some tools available.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, I think that ship has sailed, at this point. So, I mean, the one thing I'll say about it is it does set the stage for the cost of service analysis. So, I mean, here it is. We know, the smoke is cleared and here we are. So.
I agree completely,
Good
Larry,
data.
but my problem is this table should have hit us a long time ago. Okay. And, I'm just frankly taken aback that we haven't seen this data prior to this. And I agree with Cynthia, the reserves did their job, as you heard me say 100 times. All in my career up until the last 5 or 10 years, these were called drought reserves. It's always what they've been called for exactly this problem, and they functioned as they should. However, the problem is we're still $10 to $15 million light in our funding, and I think it puts real pressure on Roger Roberts' statement earlier about refunding, replenishing the reserves as quickly as possible, because we have no idea what's coming around the corner. In particular, in terms of water, it doesn't look good, that's for sure, but it could be okay.
Yeah, the one thing I didn't understand, and maybe Roger will chime in, is what interest rates have to do with refunding the reserve, because I don't think we can borrow money and put it in reserve. That's prohibited under our borrowing agreements. So, and speaking of that, the one thing that jumped out at me is our debt coverage ratio, which has dropped by 50%. That to me is a significant number that is kind of sobering. I mean, we're 1.25 is what we're required. So we're still over, but we're significantly less than we were when we were fat and happy at 2.8. So
the main reason we are still at 1.4 is because the CMF, without the CMF, we will be actually below our debt
yeah,
covenant.
absolutely. Absolutely. That CMF really got us through this revenue drought.
Yeah, because it's not flow adjusted. So,
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah. Correct. So that actually was a good decision, and it was a decision that I was very uncertain about, but it turned out to have been a very good decision. So.
Well, hark back to my conversations about the Flying Club, if you remember those. As you push things into the fixed rate, obviously it gets easier to run the business because you're guaranteed a flat amount of money. But I think what Roger Roberts has been talking about, Larry, what I understood him to say is he was proposing that we consider the reserve charges to be an expense and to pay them off of a bond with it as an expense. I don't think it's really fair to say we're putting the money in reserve. We are, but what we're really doing is paying back what we borrowed from ourselves. So that's what I understood. He'll obviously speak for himself on this, but that's what I understood him to be saying when he's talked about this.
Okay, well,
Yeah, so if I could, I do think, and we'll look into, just so we all understand, Director Braggeman's point of the ability to directly bond to replenish your reserves, but I also understand, Director Russell, your point of, well, if instead it replaces some capital dollars that were spent.
Exactly.
I got that.
Exactly.
Right. And the other option, of course, is going forward as we develop the COSA to be planning for replenishment over X number of years of the reserve. So we do have some tools, as you'll see in an upcoming slide or two. In the near term, we do need to be thinking about the level of conservation and associated reduction in sales and how to get through between now and some point where we do start replenishing it.
one thing I would consider is moving the pension reserve and back into the rate stabilization fund. I mean, we're really, that we set up that pension reserve a few years ago, and it's really just been sitting there. And I really don't think we're going to be moving it to CalPERS too soon. So it's to me, I mean, why not just put it where we actually could use it?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely a number of strategies, and that's a reasonable one. I'd say for now it's sitting there, so it's not bad, but understanding that the board could take that action if we did get in a point of time we need to replenish it, or just do it proactively in advance. So
Yeah, it's just,
we could bring that as another discussion to the board.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that from a time sensitive standpoint, that again, Roger brought up, I think, a really good point, which is if we are wanting to do something, particularly along the lines of what Director Russell suggested, or maybe it's the intention of Roger Roberts' comment, which is to use bonded funds to pay for capital costs that we've incurred recently because of the drought, that would be a quick way to replenish our reserves. And so my question becomes, where are we at with our reserves with respect to what we think we might need in a short term? Because replenishing the reserves as part of our cost of service is going to take time, and we may have urgent needs for our reserves in the coming year. And I think there's a time sensitive question to figure out very soon here while rates are still relatively low.
And
that's not exactly right, Monty, because this is totally flexible. I mean, you took it to be over time of raising them a little bit to pay the reserves. It doesn't have to be that way. It can be put into the COSA as a one-time hit in the first year. So there's more flexibility than that in our budgeting. Your thinking's right. It's a way of looking at it, that's smooth and steady. But what concerns me even more is I have no idea, which means I don't think anyone has an idea of what we're going to need for next year.
Right.
So let us, if we could, get through the next few slides. And I do think what I'm taking for this at the next finance committee meeting, and we did anticipate this based on the questions we're hearing from the board, will bring a more targeted, deeper discussion on kind of the what if scenarios and the different tools, so we can all be comfortable, even in some worst case scenario, a deep drought this next winter, that financially will be viable using the range of tools that we'll identify. So we'll plan on that.
Could I just have one other comment, which is that the most recent figures show demand elasticity as sort of snap back to normal consumption. So that's going to have an effect, a beneficial effect on revenue. So it may not be quite as drastic as we're kind of discussing.
Yeah, but I look at those numbers. It's a good point, and not to belabor this, so we then can move forward. But I see people snapping back as you know a concern. At the same time, I know we like revenue, we need revenue, but we also are trying to also continue to keep the attention on the fact that we are in an extreme dry year. I like the revenue coming in that we see in February, but I don't like the increase in consumption necessarily. But I know it's because we had an exceptionally dry February over last year. So that might not be an indicator of the future, because our April and May and June may be just as dry and limited in use as we saw last year.
Yep.
You're exactly right, Monty. And what concerned me is if you go back to that monthly AMI, I'm not proposing we go back, Ben, but if you go back and look at that when you have an opportunity, the Tiburon Belvedere consumption in February was greater than it was in 21 in February. So it actually, we did fine in January, but in February we didn't do so well. And so, I'm a little concerned there. And being I'm the one that pushed forward primarily pushed forward the reserves for the pension, I am willing and in support of what Larry Bragman is proposing, as long as we get a commitment from the board to put that money back in the not too distant future and hopefully increase it. So we deal with this issue of this future liability.
It sounds good.
I have an unrelated question here on our $4 million over budget on Sonoma County water purchases. Is that purely a drought anomaly, or is it at all related to our Costanza pump improvements and our ability to take more water, and therefore something that we should be planning for in our budget process?
That's a great question, Director Gibson. The answer is both, in a way, in that certainly we've been buying as much water that we could, because when we were relative to Sonoma system very short, and we've maintained that level somewhat uniquely, even though we're at 90% plus full, we're still pulling as much water as we can, benefiting from Castagna, understanding the cost, but on the heels of the shortage and still in a regional drought, wanting to be conservative. I do think, and staff has talked about that as we start thinking about bringing to the board, we're still some time away from it, but starting to talk about the next budget and rate cycle, likely budgeting for more water from Sonoma, because it is a way to be more resilient. There is a cost to it, and there's a recognition that doing what we're doing now, there's that, X number of years out of 10 will be spilling water, but it's probably I'm not going to weigh in on the relative merits, but the benefit of doing this, of course, is you're in you have less risk, but there's a cost associated with it.
Right.
On the other hand, Ben, the real risk in doing that is that the water goes over the spillway, but the water that goes over the spillway is deducted from the release. So, we have a flow requirement, not a requirement to release so much water from the reservoirs. So it kind of all works together. Whether I know it pains me also to see $1,000 an acre foot water going over the spillway. I got the
Director Russell,
but,
that's a good point. Of course, when we're going over the spillway is times that it's very wet and the stream wouldn't need any releases anyway. So it really is water that arguably we bought that is not going to an environmental or, public benefit.
Well, maybe to a fish benefit, though. I'm sure they enjoy more water than less.
Fair point.
Yeah, well said.
All right, so back to the operating unrestricted fund. So this is projecting for this fiscal year end. We started out this year at 32.6 million with our best estimate of projected revenue loss at 10.5 million, slight expenditure savings of $300,000. And we also had a transfer in from the rate stabilization fund for 1.5 million. We estimate ending this year at 23.9 million. This is a total decrease of reserves of about $9 million or 27%. Next slide.
And before you leave that, what does that give us in terms of months of operating revenue?
About
We-
3
we-
months.
3 months. Okay, so we're not too bad.
Three.
We've been shooting for 6, but 3 is not too bad.
Right.
So looking forward into next year, as you all suggested, this model shows water consumption at the same levels as it was consumed this year. That's how we projected the revenue. At that point, we would have a $12.5 million revenue loss over the budget. And this number also includes the 4% rate increase that will take effect in July of this year. If we do continue to fund the conservation rebate program at the same amounts of this year of $2 million, it would be additional unbudgeted expenditures of about 1.5 million. We also have some additional costs of water, and this is due to price rising. In the budget, we originally budgeted about 4% cost increase, but it looks like it's coming in closer to 6%, which would account for about $200,000 more of cost for water. This assumes the same level of last year without the additional 3,000 acre feet. So we are projected to end next year, if no corrective action is taken, at 9.7 million, or a loss of $14.2 million of reserves.
And this is what we're going to keep refining these numbers. Of course, it's conservative on one hand, based on the limited data we have that water sales is at the same level and we don't see a bounce back. On the other hand, it assumes budgeted water purchases. And I think in talking to the board, we may want to maintain this more kind of aggressive or proactive posture in terms of purchasing water that would reduce the 9.7 even more. So yeah, this, what we have getting through this fiscal year, and then we have next fiscal year as well to be cognizant about, as you see in the slide.
I didn't understand the comment, Ben, about the 4 and 6%. Where is that cost increase coming from?
So in our originally adopted budget for next fiscal year, we assumed
Yeah.
a 4% price increase for the purchase of water.
For
But
Sonoma County?
it-
What
it-
are you talking about?
Director
What's the source?
Russell, if you look at on the slide, estimated unbudgeted expenditures, additional cost of water, it's just reflecting what that $200,000 is, which is the delta between what we budgeted, a 4% increase in the unit
I
cost
see.
of Sonoma
I see.
water.
I see. I
versus-
gotcha.
yeah.
It's not the cost of the Sonoma water, it's the fact we use more of it.
No, it's the cost. Their cost, unit cost is going up 6% instead of what we assumed of 4%.
But you say assumed, but don't they put out a chart of what they're charging? That's what I remember that.
Right, our budget, right, is a forecast when we.
No, but I
develop-
understand that, Ben, but I'm talking about Sonoma County. Don't they tell us at the beginning of the water year what it's going to cost us for the water? Or is that a flexible number that they just change as they wish?
No, they're telling us now that starting July 1st, their unit costs will be going up approximately 6%. The budget we have in place, because we already have an adopted budget, assumed a 4% increase in their unit cost.
Okay, now I understand. That's what I wanted, that clarity. Because now it makes me even more interested in insisting on a COSA from Sonoma County. Okay, because we're basically at their whim of how their budget, we're kind of like the Visa card in the background, huh? You need more money, just raise the rates. And it seems to me that we need to see some long-term, some justification for raising those rates. Also, Ben, I'd like you to reflect a little bit on Castagna under these scenarios. You know, we're all thinking that we have more water available, which is good, but the cost impact could be quite substantial, especially with respect to the conversation you and I just had about the water going over the spillway. You know, I'm not criticizing Castagna, don't misunderstand, I'm all for it. But, you know, we need to delicately balance, which is impossible to do, delicately balance what we think is going to happen versus what really happens. You know, we don't know how much water to take.
That's exactly right. And I think it's probably somewhere between our historical practice of being very focused on the fiscal and the cost and keeping purchases to the minimum, probably shifting from where we are now, which is just taking as much water as we can, almost regardless of the cost. But we're going to continue to bring those discussions to the board on what we're thinking, where we are, what we're doing. But it's, as you noted, it's kind of a balance.
Very well said.
Next slide.
One more slide.
There's two more, but I can talk to them. Oh, there it is. So just looking at the financial challenges, which we've mostly talked about already, strong possibility of drought continuing into next year, less revenue, increased rebate program costs, increased water costs. Also, unfortunately, we have less reserve balances to fall back on. As was mentioned earlier, we use the rate stabilization fund this current fiscal year to the tune of about $7 million. So now that's down to $2.25 million. So we can rely on that less, obviously, next year. Our unrestricted reserve balance is drastically low if all things being said come true and no corrective action is taken. We also have potential operating costs of the intertie project for approximately $10 million. And that's if the project doesn't move forward as a capital project and becomes operating expense.
I don't follow that.
Yeah.
How does it, I understand you're saying it's not a capital project, but that's sort of not true, right?
Well,
You're just saying.
If I could, Director Russell, and this is common practice, not just here, but throughout the industry, terms of accounting practices and principles. And when you capitalize planning efforts and design efforts, as long as the construction occurs, you're good having used capital dollars. There was some number of years ago, for example, where we did quite a bit of planning, as you know, on desal. When the capital project did not move forward, the operating budget had to reimburse the capital funds. So that's really what we're talking about here. I mean, timing, you know, it's not a tomorrow issue. We're just putting it here to flag it to the board. And the 10 million, I think, as you saw in a recent email, is an estimate. Half of that's been spent and half we're currently in discussions.
And of course, we can do that manipulation of the money in part by also pushing off capital projects, huh? So it isn't that it's necessarily a $10 million hit guaranteed. It's just, it could be spread out over an impact on the capital projects going forward.
Well, the thing is, it's got to come from the operating budget, not the capital budget. If what you're saying is right, were it actually to go forward, but.
No, Ben, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying is future capital projects could be curtailed to provide more money in the operating budget. That's what I'm saying.
No, so CMF, well, you'll see on the next slide.
Okay.
One way to do it is to use a portion of the CMF for debt service, which would free up the equivalent dollars from the operating budget, if that makes sense to you.
It does. It does. And what does that do to the DCR or whatever it's called, the debt coverage ratio? Have you looked at that yet?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. We haven't looked at that nuance.
Yeah.
Let's go to the next slide.
So this is just the final slide and summary. Over the next few months and year, we have some financial options to consider. Conservation incentives, hiring freeze, and again, using the capital maintenance fee to pay debt service, thus lowering the funding of capital improvement projects.
And these are right conversations we're going to have over the next few months, governed in part by where the actual revenues are and what they're looking like. But also, of course, just we do need to be prepared for what if scenarios. So we'll be doing a much deeper dive into really what we kind of introduced today at subsequent meetings, finance meetings.
Okay. It's been a pretty lively conversation. Any further board, and I do want to get to public comment. So any further board comment on the issues raised today? Okay, then it looks like Roger Roberts has his hand up. So let's go to public comment. Since we've been talking all about you, Roger.
Am I on?
You're on.
Loud and clear.
My remarks were anticipatory of financial stress. And if we agree that you're facing financial stress, I think the sooner you take action on reducing that stress, the better off we'll be. That may mean that you have to do 2 COSA analyses this year. One in order to take care of immediate needs, and another later on when you make your decisions on what the long-term capital plan for replacement and improvement of resilience will be. So I would urge you to take action partially now to meet the current stress, and then do it again later with respect to rate adjustments to take care of long-term needs. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. Do we have any other public comments, Terry? Terry, you're on mute.
There are none.
Okay. I believe that brings us to the end of our agenda. Can we take a minute, Terry, and talk about the next meeting? Because I believe I'm back east for our conference at the time of the next meeting. And Ben, there's been a little back and forth on email. I'm not completely clear about what your thinking is about this next meeting. Or you're thinking about a meeting on the 12th, was that it?
We are, the meeting I think you're referencing is our water supply resiliency project update. That meeting we're trying to schedule. So Terry's working with the board. We are now targeting the week of the 18th due to.
So we're just going to skip the week that I'm gone.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
For that meeting, we just weren't able to schedule it. There were a whole number of constraints.
I see. Are there other meetings that week that I just need to know about?
Which week?
So I'm gone the week of the 11th of April.
So there's a doc meeting on the 15th.
Okay, that's fine. I can either do that remotely or I can just skip it. But is that the only one then? Because I had in mind for getting back to this issue. So that's concerning because it means that's a month out before we'll be talking about the goals for the water supply assessment, which has been well underway. So I do think I think that's a board policy issue and we need to be talking about that before we're told, well, that ship has, maybe not sailed, but is, pretty far down the road. I think that especially given what we're hearing here today about the financial situation, that goal setting will drive those decisions. Certainly the way that the decision support model that the consultant set up indicates. So I think we need to find some way to have a board conversation before the 18th.
Right, so the week of the 18th is planned to go into the water supply assessment in terms of the goals, in terms of the numeric targets. And we'll be working in parallel, of course, developing the technical underpinnings and updating the costs of the various projects. But in terms of bringing it to the board for decision-making, we will be
I'm
working.
not, just to be clear, I think this is a big topic, and I don't think it is a matter of bringing it to the board for decision-making. I mean, ultimately, but first we need a conversation. That's a conversation. We need to have
Absolutely.
a conversation before we're told today you're making a decision. I think I speak for the entire board when I say that is not the way we need to go on goal setting.
And I misspoke. In terms of decision-making, what I meant, I was just trying to be clear that we will work through the board, and we're planning and understand we'll have numerous conversations on the topic you're talking about, which is foundational, well prior to any decision-making on projects. So
No. I'm not talking about projects, Ben. I'm talking about, if I could finish my sentence. I'm talking about the water supply assessment, which is, we've seen the layout for it. So I'm not talking about decision-making on projects. I'm talking about how that assessment is going to be conducted, and it is goal-driven. So that's not a conversation that can be put off. By goals, what we're talking about is, where do we want our GPC to be? Do we, are we just assuming we're just aiming for 15% below our, 2020 urban water management plan? That could be where we end, but it cannot be just an assumption that the consultants make. The board needs to have input early into where we're trying to reach with that demand assessment. So this is not about decision-making on projects. This is about guiding that assessment, and those goals are going to drive that scenario planning. Are we all agreed about that?
absolutely, I fully am on
Okay.
board.
So
with
putting
everything
off
you said.
any board input at all into goal setting into late April, when this assessment has been going on for 4 months, it seems to me is problematic.
I assure you it won't be. That discussion will be foundational for the subsequent work.
For the subsequent work, I just don't know what that, Ben, they're already working. They're already doing scenario planning. So those scenarios have goals embedded in them. That is the nature of scenario planning. They went through their whole decision support, their whole decision, their whole model. Their entire model is goal driven. So what are they doing without board input on those goals?
We are currently developing a suite of supporting documents, data, information from other agencies to assist the board in the goal and target development, because we do believe that data is critical for the board. For example, frequency of the droughts, risk, how much risk? Well, that's all data driven. So that needs to come to the board in context of the goal and target setting. But what we absolutely understand that's going to take a number of discussions with the board, and it's essential that we get it right. I fully agree with you, because that discussion is absolutely foundational for the subsequent steps in the project.
Specifically the scenario planning. I mean, we've all been through this many times, and certainly, Jacob's laid out a very classic approach, which is there's a level of service goal that we're trying to reach. All the scenarios will be geared for that. Correct?
So I was advised that this topic wasn't on the agenda. I don't know how far we want to be getting into this at this point.
The agenda, part of our agenda is setting agendas, right? So I don't want to get into I'm not trying to talk about the agenda, about the substance of the assessment. I'm concerned about it not agendizing this item in a timely way. And I think that is appropriate for this meeting.
So I'm just trying to clarify, are we talking about scheduling the working meeting of the board?
I am concerned that.
No, that's not what we're talking about.
Oh, okay.
Molly.
What do you think?
She's
we're talking
asking you, Cynthia, No, you're talking, well, what I'm hearing you say is we need another meeting before that meeting. We're not talking about the one on the week of the 18th. We're talking about something before that. Yes?
I think, I mean, I'm just concerned that all of this scenario planning is going on. And I've certainly heard from constituents concerned as well. They're like, what are the goals? Why aren't we talking about this? Why isn't there any public input into what we're trying to achieve? The entire purpose of the water supply assessment is to provide the board and the staff with scenario planning so that we can be making decisions. So the single most important thing, I mean, people can disagree, but one of the single most important things is, what are we doing? What is the objective, right? And that is going, and that can
Well, I
be
think-
not
I'm
just one
sorry.
thing, but we have to be able to have a board.
Caller, I
conversation.
think if it's appropriate for us at this point to talk about schedule.
Okay.
And if we're talking about wanting to have a board meeting discussion and what should be agendized when, I think that's perfectly appropriate. So I don't know if
That's
you're
what I'm trying
making
to
a
get at.
suggestion in that direction. That's
Is
That's
there
what
any,
I'm trying to get at.
any opposition to scheduling a meeting sooner?
I'm gone on vacation next week and Director Kohler is gone the week of the 11th, which we were targeting. So it's just, and then there's other board conflicts. So we would have liked to have done it earlier, but I don't see an issue associated with the substance of the project personally doing it with the 18th. And I assure the board that we are going to work with the board to get the goals, to get the targets right. And we aren't going to be jumping ahead with some other assumptions in the subsequent work of the project. I do think it's laid out in that manner.
Can this be an item that's brought up on our April 5th board meeting? Can we do some
Well,
work then?
Well, we do have some, we are planning to begin talking about it in the water supply assessment on April 4th. We aren't going to benefit from the rich, robust data that the board's going to need really coming up with the numeric target. So yes, I do think some of the discussion, but very preliminarily will begin then.
I think that would be great. And I think I like Monty's idea about agendizing a preliminary conversation because, Ben, I absolutely respect what you're saying about the need for robust data. But I also think there's just a straight up policy question for the board to start discussing. Remember, the Brown Act limits our ability to talk to one another, right? So we need to have these meetings focus in on these policy issues. So I'm not trying to get sideways with you, Molly, about what those issues are, but I am concerned that I don't want to miss opportunities. And I think Monty makes a strong point about at least beginning to talk about those targets and frankly, engaging with the public on them. Like I say, I've had a lot of correspondence from constituents saying, we don't understand what this assessment is for. We don't understand what it's targeting. We don't understand what you're trying to do with it. And I think a big part of that is, are we just going to be at the same, are we just, targeting the same GPCD approach that we've had for a long, long time? Or are we going to recognize the new reality of our climate changing world? I think that's a policy conversation. And I think we can begin to have that. While I totally respect and agree with you, Ben, about the need for data, I also think we can have a policy conversation at a high level.
Okay, I think at the 4th, we'll be able to begin some of the kind of pure policy discussions you're talking about.
Great, thanks.
Are you talking about the 5th? What's on the 4th?
Yeah, sorry, the 5th, the first board meeting in April.
Okay, board meeting,
Yeah.
yes.
5th, it's the 5th. Okay, thank you.
And is there also a meeting on the 4th for the is there also a meeting on the 4th?
No, I misspoke on about the 4th. I meant the 5th.
Okay, thanks. All right, thank you very much. All right, with that, any further board comment on any of this stuff, or are we adjourned? All right, thanks, everybody. And thanks
Thank you, folks.
You.
staff
See y'all.
and Jerry for
Bye.
all of your help doing the first hybrid meeting. I think it was a success.
Thank you.
Thank you.